Good evening, everybody. Welcome to today's session. My name is Paras Fatnani. I'm the Chief Strategy Officer and co-founder at Seed Global Education. Today, in partnership with the Elliott School at George Washington University, we're bringing you today's session. We'll wait for a couple of minutes before I start off for folks to join in. But while we're waiting, through the chat functionality at the bottom of your screen, if you could tell us which city are you joining in from, just so we understand which countries or which parts of the country as well that folks are joining in from. We've got welcome Ridhima from Chandigarh. We've got someone from Surat. Lovely to have you here from Haryana. Lovely. So just keep posting. We'll give it a couple of minutes for folks to join in. We've got students from Pune, Kolkata, Srinagar, Odisha, Assam. So quite a broad spread. We've got people covering the north, the west, the south, and the east now across India. Anybody that's not from India that's joining in as well, please post the country and the city you're coming in from. Great to see folks from Delhi and Mumbai joining in as well. Lovely to have you all here. Today's session, as I mentioned, we will talk about transnational security, the importance of that, and how climate change is impacting that as we look at a broader future as well. We've got folks from Ghana joining in as well. Welcome, Kelvin. Good to see you here. Lovely to have all of you here. We've got about 120 people in the room already. We'll give it another minute just for a few others to join in. Great to see all of you here. We've got experts from George Washington University's Elliott School. They'll talk to us about what it is, one, to study at George Washington as well, but two, today's main topic will be around transnational security. Great to see all of you here. We've got about nearly 150 in the room. Just in the interest of time, we'll kick off. We will also be broadcasting this live on YouTube for anyone that's keen to watch us there too. Once again, welcome from my side. My name is Paras Fatnani. I'm the Chief Strategy Officer and co-founder at Seed Global Education. Across today's session, we'll hear a little bit of an overview of some of the major transnational security challenges that nations currently are experiencing and how these issues frequently intersect. We'll also talk about how accelerated climate change increases dangers associated with religious extremism, drug trafficking, as well as human trafficking as well. We've got two experts here with us today. Dr. Lal, who is the Associate Professor for International Affairs at the George Washington University. She teaches graduate courses on transnational security, foreign policy, as well as international economic policy. She's also the co-chair of the Global Affairs and Religion Network, more popularly known as Garnet. Her research focuses on organized crime, terrorism, religious extremism, human trafficking or human rights, China, South Asia, and other areas as well. So we're really pleased to have Dr. Lal here with us today. Alongside her, we also have Daniel Goldstein, who is the Associate Director for Graduate Admissions at the George Washington University Elliott School. She's been with them since 2019. And prior to that, she completed her MA in Education and Human Development, specializing in higher education administration. And she's also an alum from George Washington. So lovely to have you both here. We've got nearly 200 people in the room now. Dr. Lal, I'm going to, just before I hand it over to you, we'll take our first poll. So for everybody in the room, you will see a poll question come up on your screen in just a second. We're going to ask you, are you looking at pursuing higher studies or a career in international affairs? Just a quick yes, no, or maybe. Are you currently interested in pursuing a career in higher studies? Pursuing a career or higher studies in international affairs? You'll see a pop-up on your screen. If you can just select quickly a yes, no, or maybe. We'll keep the poll open for just another 30 seconds. For all of you joining in, welcome. We've just crossed the 200 mark. So a poll on your screen at the moment. Are you interested in pursuing higher studies or a career in international affairs? Yes, no, maybe. We'll in 10 seconds, we'll be closing this poll now. So for any of you that have not responded, please take a quick second to respond to it. Lovely. So we'll close the poll now. Let's see the numbers come in. About 41% are actively considering a career or pursuing a program in international affairs, but similar 48, 49% are currently unsure what might be right for them, and about 10 people are unsure or are not looking to build a career in the domain. So majority of the folks are either considering actively or are potentially looking at options as well. So with that, we'll close our poll. Through the session, just a couple of things before I hand it over to Dr. Lal to start. If you have any questions that you want to ask Dr. Lal, or just more broadly about the Elliott School as well, please post them through the Q&A section at the bottom of your screen. For all of you joining in, the Q&A section is for questions that you may want to ask as the session continues. If Dr. Lal or Daniel are asking you questions and they ask you to respond, please use the chat functionality to respond to them if you have anything. If there is a question that's already been asked and you want to ask something on the same lines, upvote that question so we know that we'll ask that with more priority. Don't ask the same question multiple times. We're just going to make sure that we cover as many questions as we can throughout the session. So with that, welcome everybody once again, and I'll hand over to Dr. Lal to present next. Dr. Lal, you're on mute at the moment.
Thank you. That's really useful. Thanks so much for having me here today. I'm really looking forward to talking to all of you. What I'm going to do is I'm going to start off by just giving a broad overview of what is transnational security. What I often find is that students, even in the US, who are in security policy studies, who are in my program where I teach, are not clear on what transnational security is. So I just want to kind of go into that a little bit. And I think the first thing to think about when it comes to transnational security is how the world system works. So I'm just going to talk a little bit about the world system. And I use the fishy model, which is these three little fishies. And what they show in this photo is how I think the world works when it comes to transnational security. If you are a big fish, the big fish on the right, that would be maybe the United States, maybe China, then you were going to say, those rules of the system are just. This is a good world. I like the rules. I can eat fish anytime I want. Now, let's say you are a mid-sized fish. Mid-sized fish probably would include India, France, Britain, Canada, a lot of countries that are doing quite well. Those fish may say, hey, there is some justice in the world. We get to eat a lot of fish. But at the same time, every once in a while, the big fish comes along and eats us. So there's some justice in the world. It's not perfect. And if you're a small fish, now I'm going to call the small fish some smaller countries in Latin America or in sub-Saharan Africa or in, like Cambodia and Laos. These are small countries that do not carry a lot of economic and military clout, and they often get eaten by other fish. So they're the ones that are saying there is no justice in the world. And so this what I call the fishy analysis is very important for understanding how these rules really work in the end. And the other thing I want to just talk about is, how the concept of security is changing so that we can understand what is transnational security. First, you have to understand what is national security. So, I'm just going to throw that question out to you guys for a second in the chat. What is national security? Just type in anything that you can think of, a few of you, whoever, I'd like to hear what you think about. Let's see, am I seeing anything pop up? Let's see. Well, let's see. I'm not seeing them pop up in the, oh, here, no. No, I am in
So,
the Q&A.
Daflal, there's a
Yes,
response from
yes,
Alicia who says
I see.
security of all overall citizens of a nation.
Okay, that's good. Thank you, Alicia. Yeah, security, and Gunjan says security and peace within the country. This is good. It's like a good. Thank you. These are useful. And these are kind of what we are thinking of. And they're very nebulous concepts, right? Like Ashish is saying, the defense of the state, including its citizens. So you can see that there are a lot of different ways of looking at this. Is it, when you're talking about national security, are we talking about the security of the country, as in its national borders? Or are we talking about the people inside the country? Are we talking about the economics of the country? And then as Gunjan is again saying, freedom and justice and liberty, are we talking about nebulous concepts? Protecting citizens. So there are a lot of different things to think about when we think national security, and different countries define it differently, right? Often when you hear people talking about in the news, they're talking about national defense. They're talking about defending against other countries. But we have to think also in terms of internally. And one of the things that I would say that we did get wrong with national security in this past decade, and last decades even, in general, many countries, is, for example, not thinking hard enough about health security. We saw that when COVID hit all of our countries. It wasn't really on the radar screen. How do we protect the people inside of our country from a massive health threat that crosses our borders? And one of the things that we realized was that domestic security cannot be easily separated from international security. In some sense, I would say countries like India understand this a little bit more because there are many terrorist attacks and issues, separatism issues that happen inside a country like India that make you understand that domestic security cannot be easily separated from international security. For a country like the US, it can be a little bit less clear to the people inside the country because it's very rare, except for 9/11, things like that, for the people inside the country to be hit by an attack from outside. Nonetheless, one of the things that we notice is that it's pretty hard for governments to make decisions about all of these domestic and international things in an effective way. Because, for example, when you look at this map of transnational issues, you'll see the type of topics we're talking about. Pandemics like COVID, terrorism, cyber threats like Tanay mentioned, warlords, human trafficking and drug trafficking, arms trafficking, economic threats, energy, and of course, climate change, which supercharges all of this. When you look at these types of threats, what they are, what these transnational threats are things that cross borders that cannot be controlled easily at all by governments. So these are things that are, they don't stop for border control. They don't stop for a passport check. These are things that just cross borders and can damage the security of your people. And we have to think about this in a very serious way and in a different way than we have done in the past. For decades, most governments didn't really think very comprehensively about these things, especially because most governments have, for example, one cone that deals with terrorism, one cone that deals with health, one cone that deals with cyber, another one, so these are all segregated inside of government administrative sections. And what that does is, because of the nature of transnational threats, which cross several of these at the same time, it becomes very difficult for governments to deal with them. And in addition to that, what we see is, because they're crossing, as you can see, the green lines on the left of the screen, the light green is, we've got cocaine crossing from Latin America up north and into Europe, and from West Africa. And then you have, the heroin going from Afghanistan and South Asia into Europe. And you've got the counterfeit goods going everywhere. So when you look at the way these flows go around the world, you can see that not one government is involved. There is the governments of the country, the source countries, governments of the transit countries, and governments of the receiving countries. And so there, you have to have a lot of coordination, not only inside your government, but also with other governments. And this causes actually massive failure in policymaking because we're not very effective at it, right? Of that level of coordination and that level of sharing and so forth. So I'd say those are some of the key things to think about in terms of what is transnational security. Now, I'm just going to talk for a second, a few minutes about some things that we're seeing that are changing, that are on this map. For example, on the one hand, we know that opium poppies are more drought resistant than wheat. And that's one of the reasons why growing opium is quite popular, because of course it's very profitable for people. You can sell opium for higher amounts of money than you can sell wheat, but also when you have climate change occurring and when you have drought occurring, it's actually more economical to be growing opium poppies than it is to be growing wheat because you will have less losses. On top of that, though, which makes things even more complex, is the fact that cartels, drug cartels, don't want weather-related losses. And so right now, as climate change continues, as the world is continuing to kind of accommodate these type of climate changes, cartels are increasingly moving away from heroin. We're moving away, you're seeing a move away from plants. Why? Because you have to pay people, you have to pay farmers, you have to pay for water, you have to pay for land, you have to pay for all of these things to come together and make a profitable crop. And instead, what you could easily do if you're a very efficient criminal is you could start moving towards methamphetamines and fentanyl, which is what we are seeing. The move towards chemical-based, man-made drugs, which are actually more dangerous than heroin and more reliable in times of climate change, actually. So these are some of the dangerous sort of trends that we're seeing. Now, I'm just going to tell a quick story about that can help tie together some of this, about a woman who was living in Venezuela. And, Venezuela was dealing with drought and, their economy took a real hit as a result of drought and also because of their political situation. And so this woman takes a job selling phones. And she says, she sees this ad and it says, you can sell these cell phones in Brazil and you're going to have an international job. And of course, a lot of people want to have an international job. She's pregnant, she needs to make money to raise this child. So she says, okay, I'm gonna take this job. Well, once she takes this job, she goes to meet them at the car and they stuff her in this car and they kidnap her. And they take her to a place and they say, okay, you are going to carry these pellets of cocaine. And she says, no, I'm not carrying pellets of cocaine. So she is repeatedly raped. And then they stuff her legs with kilograms of cocaine. And they put her on an airplane to go to Hong Kong. So she flies to Hong Kong with about 10 kilos of cocaine attached to her. And when she lands in Hong Kong, she's immediately arrested and put in prison, where she is given a 25-year sentence. Now, a few things that we see in this particular case is that the drug cartels used a pregnant woman because they figure, A, she is more likely to make it through. So we are seeing the increasing use of women and pregnant women as drug mules. But also there is a theory that victims like herself are set up to fail, that, we're going to put them on the plane because there's actually another load of drugs that are going through that is more high priority and they expected her to get caught as a distraction. But what we're seeing here is the nexus of economic development, the fact that this individual needed money for her family, drought was happening, the economy does not have all the opportunities they're looking for, and how the drug cartels leverage that and take advantage of that, right? Now, I'll tell another story. Look at this map of demographics. Again, this one is of in China, because you had the one-child policy for a long time. You have now a imbalance where you have, I believe, if I'm correct, 60 million excess males to females who are looking for a bride in China. And as a result of that, these men who are in China and looking for a bride, they say, okay, well, how am I supposed to find one? Now, especially if you're agricultural and you don't make as much money as your friends who live in Beijing or Shanghai, you know, these men are finding that they're having difficulty finding a bride. All the women have fled the countryside and moved to the big cities because they're looking for where the life is and the jobs are and so forth. As a result, these men go on the online marriage market, or they hear about these brokers that are nearby who can help them buy a bride from nearby countries. Now, the nearby countries such as Vietnam and Cambodia and Laos are dealing with, again, climate change situations in the rural areas where crops are not doing as well, or you have flooding. And so there are families who say, okay, you know, we may need to sell our daughter into marriage in China in order to make enough money, or anyways, she'll be better off married in China than just starving here in Cambodia or wherever, right? So what we see is that the human traffickers, they will kidnap or buy women from these countries and then sell them to the highest bidders who are looking for brides in China, which can be $40,000, even up to $60,000 for one bride. Unfortunately, often when a bride is already bought in China, then what you might find is that she gets re-kidnapped and resold, and then the poor farmer guy in China is now stuck without a wife and without $40,000, and the girl is resold to the next victim. So this is some of the trends we're seeing in human trafficking. I am going to talk for a moment about human smuggling, another transnational threat. And again, this one is hypercharged very much by climate change. What we're seeing in West Africa is, again, a lot of drought and a lot of misinformation spread on the internet, on WhatsApp and other channels, where people are told there's a lot of opportunity if you just make that trek all the way across Africa into Libya, then you'll be able to get on a boat and get across the Mediterranean into Italy and Greece. So this type of information is spread. And so a lot of thousands and thousands of people, hundreds of thousands of people, make that trek. And what we've seen is that Libya has ended up being a departure point for hundreds of thousands of migrants who are trying to escape economic situations. And thousands of them die on the boat crossing the Mediterranean because the smugglers use these type of inflatable boats. As you can imagine by looking at this photo, that boat was not meant to carry that load of people across the Mediterranean. So you'll often hear about these boats going down. The smugglers don't care because they are paid before the boat leaves the coast, and you have one of the migrants actually steering the boat. So in actuality, the smuggler has no loss. They've received all their money and they don't care if the boat goes down. So the crime syndicates, what we know is that they're profiting from the trade. Each of these people are paying for passage. But many of these people are tortured or sold as slaves before they even get here, or like I said, drown on the way. And once they reach Italy or Greece, it's a very, very difficult situation, often returned back to Libya or placed in refugee camps for very extended periods of time. And we have interviews of many of these refugees who say, you know, if I had known it was going to be this miserable and horrendous, I never would have left home. But again, the power of the misinformation of these smugglers and the internet causes this trade to be extremely profitable and still growing. This is a picture, Iraq, okay? So this is about how it's affecting extremism and recruitment in extremist groups. What we know is that Iraqi men over the years in the last decade, they, again, dealing with a great deal of drought. And a lot of people who were making a decent living doing farming in previous decades, now they have a family and they say, you know what, I go to the market, I have nothing to sell. And so what they've seen is that these men go to the market, crop is dying, they're saying, okay, where can I find some food? Where can I find something for my family, some work or anything? And Islamic State for years went into these markets and they said to the farmers, the desperate farmers, they see that, they say, hey, you know, we can help you out. Here, we have a food basket for you. Or here, you know, we even, when things got very bad, they even gave out cash. And they say, hey, you know, we can help you, you just come and join us. You know, we'll give you food baskets in the meanwhile anyways. And this builds up goodwill. But then over time, what you find increasingly is that the farmers who are not making anything off the land anymore say, you know what, I don't even agree with what this crazy guy is saying. I don't agree with this ideology, but I will join because I can't let my family starve. So then you see the rise of recruitment in areas that are dealing with this type of drought and inability. And this is something we saw in particular in that was a turning point for the Arab Spring. When we have just small changes in climate, 1 degree or so, you see, that's not a lot, that's not a small amount, by the way, but what some people think is a small amount, what you see is a decrease in crop yields. And that means a lot for people in the developing world because increases in food prices are not felt equally. Whereas in the US, people spend less than 10% of their income on food. So if the price of bread goes up, nobody cares. They're like, oh, well, whatever, I'll just drink more coffee, who cares? You know, but in the, in developing areas of the world, such as parts of India, Africa, Latin America, the Middle East, Egypt, all of these countries, where you have the poorest 2 billion people spending 50 to 70% of income on food, when you have food inflation, that causes revolutions and unrest. And what we know is that between 2007 and 2011, the food grain prices doubled. And the food crisis of 2011 brought with it the Arab Spring. And analysts at the time, when they first saw the protests in Tunisia in 2010, they said, oh, it's just bread riots. This is a guy in Yemen who was protesting the price of bread, and he's wearing his bread as a helmet. And people, the analysts didn't see it coming. They didn't see that these bread protests were about to snowball into the Arab Spring protests. So just to close out a little bit, I want to mention a few things to think about when we're talking about transnational security. I think, do I still have more time? Actually, I still have more time, so I'll talk about this a little bit. I think that one of the things to think about is the illicit opportunities and what we do when we are looking at illicit opportunities. What we often do as governments is that we say, okay, this is against my morals. I like this cartoon in particular. This guy saying, in light of today's general moral outrage, we're taking devil's food cake off the menu. So this is kind of very, it signifies what politicians often do, okay? We say, well, this is our religious belief. You know, this is our moral belief. We don't believe in whatever it is. I'm talking about, you know, abortion or birth control. I'm talking about, honestly, things like eating beef, eating pork, eating whatever, you know, eating halal or non-halal, or, you know, these type of things. All of these moral decisions that we make as individuals, when we institutionalize them, like banning alcohol, it creates opportunities for criminals. When we decide that methamphetamines and cocaine are dangerous for public health, which they are, we also create opportunities for drug dealers. And we have to recognize that. You can't say just by banning things, this is going to take away the problem, okay? When we make prostitution illegal because we say, well, you know, women and men should not be selling their bodies for sex, what we are actually doing is creating a market opportunity for people who will then kidnap women and sell them. Was that what we originally intended to do? Probably not, right? So I think that that's key. When we are talking about the sale of organs, we ban the sale of organs, especially in, well, in all countries except for Iran, really. When we ban the sale of organs, we create incentives for brokers between these desperate patients and the desperate donors in poor countries. What you see is, for example, someone in a poor country being paid $4,000 or nothing because they've been kidnapped, right? And a rich person paying $100,000, $200,000 for purchasing an organ. And so all of these you know, all of these things that we have decided as a nation, as a country, as a community, that they should be banned or they should be illegal or they're just wrong, we need to think harder. You cannot just come up with policies and say, well, that's just the way it is, you know, take it or leave it. Because there are people that are literally waiting for you to say that so they can make lots of money off of poor victims, okay? I also want to mention this one. This is interesting. Malala, she has a very good quote. What terrifies religious extremists like the Taliban are not American tanks or bombs or bullets. It's a girl with a book. And this is also something that we need to think about very deeply as we look at transnational issues and how gender fits in as well across the world. It's easy enough to say, oh, well, this is extremism, this is whatever, you know, but we have to think of what is at the heart of this. What type of control are we talking about? You know, emphasizing the importance of education and independence of girls in all of these countries is very critical to moving forward in terms of reducing extremism and improving development in all of these countries. This is something we've seen consistently. So I just wanted to close with that. And I'm going to stop share so that we can go right into some, I think we're going to go into some Q&A if I'm correct, but I will throw it back to.
Thank you. Thank you, Dr. Lal, for that. 1 second. All right, perfect. Well, thank you for the session. Firstly, I think everyone listening in, you know, including myself, really enjoyed understanding the comparisons or the you know, the realities of today's world that we don't sometimes remain cognizant of. So thank you for sharing those. There are a couple of questions that have come in, so we'll take maybe 1 or 2 right now, and then we'll pass over to Daniel to make a quick presentation about the Elite School at large and what opportunities it offers, and then come back with more Q&A as well. In the meantime, for all of you listening in, if you do have questions for Dr. Lal or for the school at large, please keep posting them through the Q&A section at the bottom of your screen at the moment. Dr. Lal, one question I want to pose to you is coming from Ridhima. She says, what can governments and citizens do of a country do to reduce trafficking and extremism in general?
That is a good question. Thank you, Ridhima. That's a big question. So it's like the answer to everything of the whole semester class. But a few ideas. So first of all, on trafficking. I think on trafficking, we have to look at regulation, first of all. So let's say if we're talking about, let's look at drug trafficking first for a second. So at drug trafficking, we have to think, okay, well, we really want to make sure that children are staying away. So we should definitely ban the sale of drugs to under 18, for example, right? But let's say if you're talking about adults, you may want to have legalized vending centers that are government authorized or something, so that you know what is being sold and what amount, and that it's clean and not cut with very dangerous substances. This is one of the reasons why fentanyl became so popular in the US. They were slowly cutting the opiates with the fentanyl, which increased addiction to fentanyl. It was not regulated at all because it was simply illegal. So it's very, and now we're running into the same problem with xylazine, which is a veterinary sort of anesthetic type drug, and it's being cut into the fentanyl. So these type of lax regulations, because we simply made illegal, make it difficult. You by regulating heavily, then you can reduce drug trafficking, for example, and then also doing what some European countries have done, which is setting up cleaning these centers where you can detox. So you take away some of that stigma, people come to the center, they learn how to get a job, they get support in getting clean, and that has helped a lot in Europe. In terms of human trafficking, again, one of the things that has helped in Europe has been the legalization, so that you have prostitutes who have, for example, identity cards, health insurance. What that does is it helps take them out of under the control of the mob, of the mafias, because right now, when it's illegal to be a prostitute, if someone comes and beats you or hurts you in some way, you cannot go to the police, because the police can arrest you for engaging in prostitution. So this doesn't allow for any type of health or security of the people who are actually the victims of this type of behavior. So I think it's important to, again, regulate and make rules and allow people to come to the government and receive help of both the health and security type. Yeah, so that's just a few things on sex trafficking. On extremism, and of course, obviously, making job opportunities is key. In terms of extremism, some of the things that we are looking at is misinformation on the internet. And this has been a serious problem in recent years, because actually, I would say that extremist groups, both on the internet, on WhatsApp, on many platforms, are very powerful in getting information out and in recruiting people into extreme ways of thinking. And this is something that governments are extremely weak in being able to combat. Governments are terrible at information spreading. And so I'd say that in some ways, when it comes to, in particular, religious extremism, I would say moderate religious organizations, such as mosques, temples, churches, and so forth, can actually play a very important role in educating the community as to, no, this is the right way of thinking about this. Don't be tempted by these crazy lunatics that are saying you need to kill people. I don't care if you have to kill them for this religion or that religion or whatever. You have moderate and very sensible religious organizations that may be able to get more support from the people than, let's say, the government might on the same topics. And then in addition to that, schools need to be very cognizant and teach about misinformation and how it's important to be kind of a moral, upright citizen more than being an extreme winner. It's not as important to win as an individual or a community. It is more important to live together effectively as a nation. And that is something that needs to be taught much more effectively in schools and in communities.
And that's really well put, Dr. Lal. I think Gunjan adds to that, saying, can a treaty between countries lessen the chance of such situations? Any thoughts that you want to throw on that?
Actually, it's interesting. I mean, treaties are nice. Don't get me wrong. I'm not like anti-treaty or anything. I think they're lovely. But if you don't have the law enforcement, if you don't have people on the ground working to enforce it, there are many treaties that are not enforced. So yes, let's have some treaty. That's nice. And I would like to see the teeth behind that treaty with NGOs, governments, and religious organizations all working together to really make it work.
We'll take one more question at this point, and then we'll hand over to Daniel to present. But in the meantime, I want to encourage everybody who's here to keep asking questions through the Q&A section at the bottom of your screen. We'll try and take a few more in just under 10 minutes. So one more question before I hand over to Daniel. Dr. Lal, Ujjwal is asking, how effective are diplomacy and international relations when autocratic regimes do whatever they feel like? And as a case in point, he's mentioned about the Russia-Ukraine situation, the Israel-Palestine one, which is at the center of all conversations today. Your thoughts on that?
Yeah, no, again, these are great questions. I love it. Good job. All right. So first of all, I'm just going to say, diplomacy and international relations really, really are effective. The problem is that often autocratic regimes, by the time we have a regime attacking Ukraine, for example, it's kind of late in the game. But yes, Russia, Ukraine, we attempted with sanctions. The best thing you can do is still with diplomacy and international relations, trying to find a way to support a country like the Ukraine and constrain the profitability of a country like Russia to stop them from continuing this in the future. Those are probably some of the best ways of going about it. Again, not that effective with Russia, Ukraine right now. Israel, Palestine, I would say, is a very different animal than Russia, Ukraine, in the sense that it's much more long-term brewing and a continuous conflict, let's just say. So I think that diplomacy and international relations can be effective with Israel, Palestine. Hopefully soon it will be. But I think that when we look at that, especially Israel and Palestine, the impact of the international community coming together and saying, hey, genocide in Palestine is not going to be useful in this situation, I think is going to help getting to the right solution. I think also the international community coming together and saying, hey, Hamas, releasing hostages is super important here. You cannot hold hostages and expect good results at the same time. That is also important. So I think that in that sense, if you don't have diplomacy and countries coming in with their weight, I think that you would not have much movement on this. And in fact, the situation would simply get worse. So I think that countries have a very positive role to play here. But long term, I'm just going to say real quick, I think long term, it's very important that we educate people on what really is happening in these places and how to make solutions that are peaceful far in advance before they boil over to the state. So, but I'm going to give the floor back.
Thank you, Dr. Lal, for that. I think that puts a lot of context around what challenges in both these Russia, Ukraine, as well as the Israel-Palestine situation that's going on as well. For all of you that are here today, please keep asking your questions through the chat box. We'll now move on to Danielle to talk a little bit about what opportunities do students that are considering, because there's quite a few questions that have come in about opportunities of careers within the domain or even the programs that are available. So we'll move on to you, Daniel, at this point, but we'll come back and take more questions. For the students, please keep posting your questions, and we'll come back after the presentation and take more. Daniel, over to you next.
Wonderful. Thank you so much. Just go ahead and share my screen. Okay, great. All right. Hello, everybody. My name is Danielle Goldstein. I'm the Associate Director of Graduate Admissions at the Elliott School of International Affairs at GW. And I'm excited to talk to you today and provide you with some information about becoming a graduate student here at the Elliott School. So just to start off, I'll talk about some of the options that you have in terms of the programs that we offer here. So the Elliott School offers 8 Master of Arts programs. We also have 2 specialized master's degrees and 2 joint degree options. All of our programs are interdisciplinary and cover a really wide range of topics. So each program offers between 4 and over 15 concentrations that students can choose from. Some of our programs allow students to choose multiple concentrations or even create your own concentration. So you have a lot of flexibility to customize a program for your specific interests. All of our Master of Arts programs take about 2 years to complete if you enroll full-time. And some of our most popular master's programs here are International Affairs, International Development Studies, and Security Policy Studies. Here are some of the strongest features of our school that you'll find across all of our programs, which all really contribute to the value of your Elliott School degree. So one of the biggest keys to our entire student experience framework is the flexibility that's built into your degree program. We offer both a fall and a spring start, which means you can start your program whenever the timing is right for you. Next, I'll talk about why we offer all of our courses in the evenings. So our programs were built with students' best professional interests in mind. We want to allow students to take advantage of our unique location. Since all of our courses begin at 5 p.m. or later, students have the opportunity to work, hold an internship, or volunteer during the day, and then just walk to campus for class in the evening. Now, your capstone experience will likely be one of the most memorable and impactful parts of your studies because of how it brings together everything you learned and applies it in a hands-on real-world scenario. Your capstone course will be completed over 2 consecutive semesters. You'll sign up for a class based on a thematic topic like foreign policy or international security. You'll form small groups of about 3 to 4 students and formulate a research proposal, and then you'll work with an actual outside client to determine what your deliverables are. The skills that you develop through this process and by completing your final research paper and presentation prepare you for employment immediately after you graduate. And finally, another favorite element that all of our programs share is our skills courses. So these courses are built around feedback that our Graduate Student Services Office receives from surveys that they send to both domestic and international employers. And the courses allow students to stay up to date on the skills that actual employers are looking for in competitive candidates for their careers and internships that they offer. The Elliott School is in a unique location, and I don't just mean that we're in Washington, D.C. We are actually located right across the street from the State Department. We're about 2.5 blocks from the White House. If you keep strolling past the White House, you'll find the USAID headquarters. Students with internships at the World Bank or the IMF can make it to class in about 5 minutes. So many schools point out their DC location, but the Elliott School is truly positioned perfectly among the landmark centers for international affairs. And this has a huge impact on the kinds of speakers, events, and access that the Elliott School and our world-renowned faculty can connect you with as a student. Now, as you've probably already discovered, a graduate education of the caliber that you'll get at the Elliott School is a significant investment. So I'm sure that you have questions about fellowship opportunities and other ways to reduce your tuition expenses. So here you can see the deadlines by which you would need to submit your application in order to be considered for Elliott School fellowships. So if you're applying for our fall term, which we start in late August, you'll want to submit your application by January 7th or November 1st if you want to find out your decision early. And then if you want to apply for our spring semester, which we start in January, you'll want to submit your application by October 1st. And all that you need to do is submit your admissions application. You don't have to submit any further materials in order to be considered for the fellowships. Keep in mind that we offer partial tuition scholarships at the Elliott School that typically covers about $2,000 to $10,000 per semester. Now, because our Elliott School fellowships only cover part of tuition, we strongly encourage students to look for additional fellowship opportunities. So housed centrally at GW, we have the Office of Graduate Student Assistantships and Fellowships, which does offer some additional fellowship opportunities. You'll also find some scholarships and resources outside of GW. You might be familiar with some prominent fellowship opportunities, such as Fulbright, but there are tons of opportunities out there that are worth looking into. One really great resource for scholarships in the field of international affairs specifically is APSIA, which stands for the Association of Professional Schools of International Affairs. Their website is a fantastic resource, both for graduate school resources in general, as well as an extensive directory of fellowship opportunities. And finally, we really do our best to provide you with a wide variety of graduate school funding options on our website. I've linked it down there, so be sure you check that out and review all of those resources available to you so that you have a broad understanding of the ways that you might reduce your cost of education. Quickly, I want to go over our application prerequisites and required materials. So the first thing to note is that all of our programs, some of our programs have either 1 or 2 prerequisites in economics or foreign language, and some have none at all. more information about what fulfills those prerequisites, which programs have them, and things like that can all be found on our website. You'll need to fill out an online application. The application fee will be waived for all of you attending this information session. There will be an option to request a fee waiver at the end of your application, and you can just mention that you attended this masterclass today. You need to submit a resume or a CV and a statement of purpose. We ask for that statement of purpose to be about 500 words, and there's 2 prompts you can choose from on our website. We require 2 letters of recommendation. Generally, we ask for 1 academic reference and 1 professional reference. We require transcripts from all institutions that you've attended, as well as translations of those transcripts if they are not in English. Your bachelor's degree must be equivalent to a US 4-year bachelor's degree. And while we do evaluate most transcripts in-house, if we're unable to determine that your degree is equivalent to a US 4-year bachelor's degree, we might ask you to provide a course-by-course credential evaluation by a company such as WES. And then in terms of standardized test scores, most of our programs are test blind, which means that we don't accept GRE scores at all. A couple of our programs are still test optional, which means that you can submit scores if you wish, although most students choose not to, and there is no program that requires the GRE. We do require that international students submit English language test scores, and we accept TOEFL, IELTS, PTE, and Duolingo. All right, so that was my quick presentation, and I think that we have time for some questions now. Just in case you don't get your questions answered today, or if you think of something in the days ahead, please feel free to email us. Our email address is there on the screen. It's esiagrad@gwu.edu, and myself or my colleagues will be happy to answer any of your questions. I also invite you to attend an information session. If this little bit was interesting to you, that'll be about an hour presentation that allows us to go much more in depth about our programs and the opportunities and supports available to our students. We hold usually at least 1 virtual information session per week, so it gives you a lot of flexibility to attend one of those based on the timing that's right for you. And you can sign up there using that QR code or that link on our website. Great, I'll wrap it up there. Thank you all. I hope this was helpful.
Thank you, Daniel. Thank you for the presentation. You mentioned about the application fee waiver. If you want to just very briefly, say that again of how students can apply for the application fee waiver.
Yes. So once you have completed your online application, you'll get to a final page where you have to review your application, make sure that you've filled out all of the required fields, and then there's a button that says Save and Pay. You'll click that Save and Pay button. It'll ask you how you want to pay. There's a drop-down menu, and you'll select the fee waiver option, or it might say fee waiver request. And then you'll be able to type in your fee waiver request. There's no code that you have to use. Just say, I attended a SEED masterclass session. You can give today's date on 11/21, and then we will manually review it. It does take about 1 to 3 business days for us to review that, and then we'll send you an email once we have approved your fee waiver, and then you can go in and submit your application.
Fantastic. Thank you, Daniel. And before we move to questions, what we will do is quickly put out the second poll question. Now that you've heard about a lot of programs that the Elliott School offers, for all of you in the session, you'll see a question on your screen now. Which Elliott program are you most interested in? Is it the Master of Arts in Asian Studies? Is it the Master of Arts in International Affairs? Is it the Master of Arts in International Development Studies? Is it the Master of Arts in Security Policy Studies, which is the session that you've heard about today as well? Is it about the Masters of International Studies? Or are there other programs that you're interested in which are at the Elliott School as well? So just, if you guys can take a quick minute or two to quickly answer the poll question on your screen. There's a good 25% of you that have already answered. Let's try and, we'll keep it open for another minute or two. If you can take a minute to quickly answer this, which program at the Elliott School is of most interest to you? Is it the Master of Arts in Asian Studies? Is it the Master of Arts in International Affairs? Master of Arts in International Development Studies? Master of Arts in International Security Policy? Master of Arts in Master of International Studies? or are there other programs that are not listed here, but at the Elliott School that are of interest to you? You're still discovering, many of you are still discovering programs. So we understand that, an exact specific program may not be already on your mind. So that's not a problem. Choose the one that you feel most associated to you. Great, quite a few answers still coming in. We'll give it last 10 seconds before we close the poll. Which program at the Elliott School is of most interest to you? Right, with that, we're going to close the poll in the next 10 seconds. So for the ones that are responding to it, please do that so quickly. Which program at Elliott is of most interest to you? All right, with that, we will close the poll. There's about 40% of students that have said they're interested in the Master of Arts in International Affairs, 10% who've spoken about security policy studies, about 15% who've spoken about international development studies, about 15% again who've spoken about international studies, 5% in Asian studies, and about 20% who are choosing other programs as well. So great, thank you everybody for responding to that. We'll move back to the questions. There's several more that have come in now. And thank you everybody for posting questions, but also upvoting questions that are similar to the ones that are of your interest. I'll start with the first one, and this one, Dr. Lal and Daniel, both of you could possibly chime in on. What is the scope for international affairs for a student coming from a humanities or let's say non-traditional background for such programs? Daniel, if you want to start that off, and Dr. Lal, if you want to continue off that.
Sure. So none of our programs require that you have any specific background before starting our programs. Like I mentioned, some of our programs do have those prerequisites, such as foreign language or a couple of courses in introductory economics. But aside from that, and for the programs that don't have those requirements, you can have any background, you can have studied any major in undergrad. Our programs are interdisciplinary, and so we really value a diverse student body. We want students that are coming in with all different backgrounds and can bring different aspects into the classroom. Something that I hear from current students a lot is that they learn just as much from their fellow students as from their faculty and others as well. So yeah, we really value that diversity. The thing that I would say is if you have a totally different background from international affairs, just make sure in your statement of purpose that you're addressing why you're interested in international affairs. So make that connection to us about why you're making that decision to switch over to the field of international affairs so that we can understand it from reading your application.
I would just add briefly, I agree, of course, completely with Danielle. My classes are full of students from everything from engineering to, English to whatever, so, but what's interesting is that you can prepare whatever your background is by simply reading the news every day. That will help you prepare. Read good news, meaning what I recommend to my students is, number one, news source, which is expensive unless you have access. Financial Times, I think it's the best newspaper. If you don't have access to that, the next best one is free, BBC. They actually have very good international coverage. It's excellent. I do suggest BBC.com and Al Jazeera as some good international news sources. If you read every day, whatever your background is, I feel that you will be able to, like Daniel said, target what you're interested in and be prepared for at least coming into our classes.
Wonderful. Thank you, Dr. Lal. Thank you, Daniel, for the answers. I'm cognizant of your time, Dr. Lal. We have you for the next 6 minutes at this point. So we'll take a couple of questions that folks have asked, more broadly about the subject area that we spoke about. For others that have questions in that domain, please keep posting them. I'll try and use the next 6 minutes wisely so we can have Dr. Lal answer them. If you have admissions related questions, keep posting them. After the next 5 minutes, we'll come back to them as well. So Dr. Lal, there's Vishnu Dev who's asking, it's human nature, and I say this with caution, but he says it's human nature to do war from the beginning. in time, even in a civilized era, there's no way to stop war. Will these wars ever stop, or will humans become its own reason for extinction? Do you have an optimistic opinion about the future of human nature or existence as such?
Oh no. Okay, so this is very existential. I'm going to, okay, I hate to say this, but I am in security policy studies, and I'm optimistic that we can hopefully do better. But are we going to stop war anytime soon? No, I don't think so. We're really bad at it. Will we all kill ourselves? Hopefully not. Hey, you should do this degree and help us from our own extinction. That's what I'm going to say, because we're not doing that hot at it right now, quite frankly. That's my take on this.
No, great. There's one more question, which I'll move on to next, which comes from Sanjeev. Again, this probably indicates towards how governments act as well when it comes to for-profit opportunities. He says the fact that liquor is dangerous for health is something that we're very well aware of. But despite that, the government is selling liquor and earning through the taxes that it charges on them. Is there, apart from obviously the commercial reason, do you want to talk a little bit about that, Dr. Lal?
Yeah, no, it's very important. And I've talked to several criminal economists, economics of criminality, that is, about this. The fact of the matter is, it is far more dangerous for the government to ban alcohol, because what we have seen both in US prohibition as well as in, for example, countries like Saudi Arabia, but in India also, when you've had prohibition type things, the problem is that people start cooking their own liquor to get around the prohibition. It's super dangerous and it kills a lot of people. So the government has an interest in saying, okay, fine, liquor is dangerous. Please don't drink so much. In fact, we're going to tax it, and hopefully it'll get expensive enough that you will stop drinking so much. It doesn't always work, but the fact is that by regulating it and taxing it, it gives the government the chance to look at it and say, okay, this is actually liquor. This is not like automotive fluid or something else that will just automatically kill you, which we have seen already in some of the medications coming out in India in this past year. So it's very important. Again, everything you ban, you can't look at anymore. You don't know who's making it. You don't know what's in it. It becomes extremely dangerous because criminals have no morals about what they put in the stuff they're selling to you. So that's why the government has to allow it, quite frankly.
Thank you, Dr. Lal, for that. Sometimes it's business that's probably taking over those decisions as well. But with that, I want to take a quick second to thank you for being here with us. We appreciate your expertise that you've shared with us today. For students that would be interested, are you comfortable for them to reach out to you via LinkedIn?
Well, yeah, either LinkedIn or they can email me. My email is available, rolilal@gwu.edu. They can, but yeah, LinkedIn is fine. And please do go ahead and reach out.
Great. Well, thank you for being here with us today. We'll continue with questions with Daniel. Dr. Lal, if you'd like to, if you.
Thank you so much, everyone. I really enjoyed it. I love the questions, really great. And I hope I meet some of you in the future. Okay. All right. Bye-bye.
Thank you. Bye for now. Daniel, several more questions coming in around the applications process as well as eligibility as such. We'll try and use maximum of 10 minutes here. I'm conscious of the time that we've run over as well. But first, there's Gurkirat who's asking and 5 other people have upvoted that question as well. What career opportunities exist for someone coming in with an international relations degree?
Great question, and a very important question to be asking when you're making the kind of investment that you would make in a graduate degree. So in terms of career outcomes, one thing I'll say, actually, let me grab this link and I'm going to share it into the chat. So we share on our website several years of previous employer surveys, graduate employment surveys. So we send these surveys out to our students. Actually, sorry, I don't think that went to everybody. There we go. So you can read those surveys on our website and find out exactly where our students go. So it breaks it down in a number of different ways, but it actually lists out all of the careers that our graduates have gone on to hold after about 6 months of graduation, beyond graduation. So you can see all that info for yourself. But in terms of our graduates, we graduate about an even split that go into the nonprofit and NGO sectors, the private sector, and the public sector. So some of those, individual jobs might be working for either the US federal government, for state, city, or other local governments, for foreign governments, of course, outside of the US. In terms of private employment opportunities, that might be things like consulting. That's a big one that our students go into. Could be something like trade or economics, business, technology, things like that. And then in terms of nonprofits and NGOs, that might be things like think tanks, development and human rights organizations, educational institutions, universities, things like that. So it's really a pretty even split across the board. Some of our programs have a little bit of a different lean one way or another. So for security, definitely more, probably at least 50% or more are likely to go into the private sector, as well as public, not so much in the nonprofit sector, whereas something like development studies are more likely to go into nonprofits and NGOs that focus on development. But again, take a look at those surveys. You can see the breakdowns. Salaries are on that page as well. So definitely take some time to look into that.
Fantastic. I think, Daniel, that's a great segue to another question that's come in. It's from Marian, who says, in India, you can join the civil services through an entrance exam like UPSC. This is a domestic exam. I'm not sure if that is something you're aware of, but the question is it different in the US? Can international students pursue a career in international relations or public policy? Here now they're talking for the public sector broadly, post pursuing a program in international affairs at GW Elliott.
So some of our graduates do want to take the foreign service exam that is offered by our US government and then become foreign service officers. I believe that is only available to US citizens. So that's not something that an international student would be able to do. However, something that's really huge in the US and in Washington, DC in particular is consultants. So there are a lot of consulting firms that do sometimes hire international students and sponsor their work visas. And those students get to work with the federal government with kind of a civil service or foreign service group without actually being employed by the US federal government. So that's a way to kind of work alongside the government in the US if you're interested in that.
Okay. We'll do a little bit of a rapid fire at this point, Daniel, just to cover as many as we can. There's a question from Umda who says, for someone graduating in August 2024, when is the best time to start to apply? Go ahead.
Sure, yeah. So I'd say the best time is whatever the best time is for you. In terms of the soonest time, you can start in our fall 2024 semester. That starts at the very end of August. It'll be somewhere between like the 23rd and 29th of August. So as long as you've completed your courses by that time, you could start in fall 2024. We do require an official final conferred degree transcript. Technically, the due date for that transcript is your first day of classes in that late August date. But if you're not able to get us your degree conferral for a couple weeks after that first day of classes, that's okay, generally. Talk to us about it if you have any specific questions. If you wanted to start classes in fall 2024, you would want to submit your application by January 7th of 2024. So coming up in about 2 months or so. You also have the option to wait a little bit if you want to get a little work experience or just take a few months off between your undergraduate and graduate degrees. You could also apply for the spring 2025 or fall 2025 start terms. Those applications open up usually in about February or March of next year.
Wonderful. Thank you, Daniel. For anybody who's interested and graduates before August of 2024, we highly recommend that you start an application, get involved, be in touch with the team at GW, and they'll help you through the process as well. At the end of the day, you become an ambassador for the school. So it's in everyone's interest that the fit that we keep talking about a lot when it comes to choosing a graduate school is met on both sides. Daniel, I'll bring you the next question here, talking about the process of applications as well. Arpan asks about WES, and let's say most of the undergraduate degrees, apart from engineering in India, are generally 3-year degrees. So in a scenario, his question is, in a scenario that WES does not equate to a 4-year degree, what can they do?
Sure. So the reason that I recommend WES, if you have a 3-year degree and you're not sure if it's equivalent to a 4-year degree, is because there are some, I believe, sometimes honors degrees or different things like that. And I will say I'm not the expert here, but just from what I've seen, sometimes there are particular 3-year degrees like an honors degree that could be equivalent to a US 4-year degree. Otherwise, if you do have the equivalent of a 3-year bachelor's degree, oftentimes what I've seen students from India do is get a 1-year master's degree from India as well. And that kind of 3-year undergrad plus 1-year master's, if you then submit that to us, that becomes the equivalent to a 4-year master's degree. So that's the information that I can provide. I will say, I think Education USA is a wonderful resource, and I know a lot of the folks that work at the various Education USA offices in India. So depending on where you are, definitely recommend connecting with them, and they can help provide guidance on that as well.
Fantastic. So I think Gurkirat and Ridhima have asked similar questions around coming from a political science, economics, or commerce background, which has a 3-year degree. And Ridhima's follow-on was around work experience, which I think we've all covered at this point. So Ridhima and Daniel, you've sort of answered that, but I want to take this back as well. Another question from Ridhima comes around students who haven't studied economics or political science. Are they eligible to still apply and study here?
Yeah, so a few things. First is that if you're applying for any one of our fall semesters, you have the option to enroll in, we offer summer courses. They're not courses for academic credit. It's through our Institute for International Economic Policy. They put on their own summer courses only for our students coming into the fall 2024, or sorry, any fall term. That are introductory micro and introductory macroeconomics courses that you can take if you haven't completed those. That's only available to students who are starting in a fall semester. If you're starting in the spring, unfortunately, we don't have that option. So you would have to have completed your economics coursework prior to applying. The other thing I'll say is that there are plenty of programs that don't require the economics prerequisite. So some of the programs that we've talked about today that don't have that prerequisite are the Security Policy Studies program, which is the program that Dr. Lal teaches in, and our Asian Studies program as well, among others, don't have that economics prerequisite. So there's a few options for you.
There's a few questions, Daniel, about scholarships and funding, if you want to quickly help us talk about that too.
Sure, yeah. So there are a couple things here as well. One is making sure that you apply by our deadline so that you're considered for our Elliott School fellowships. Last year, we awarded fellowships to about 70% of our admitted student body, which is really a testament to, it used to be closer to 50 to 60%, and we have really incredibly strong applicant pool. So definitely make sure you submit by that deadline. It's the only thing you have to do in order to be considered for Elliott School Fellowship. So definitely take that kind of easy first step if you can. There are tons of external scholarships as well. And I know that it's difficult because there are some that are really specific. There are a lot of scholarships that are only available to US citizens. There's a lot of scholarships that have really kind of strange requirements, like very specific requirements. And some of them require pretty hefty applications, and they're going to take some of your time. So I know it's a lot, but I absolutely recommend looking at what all of the options are. We have a very extensive funding page on our website. If you go to the Elliott School admissions page, there's a sub-page called Funding Your Education. There's tons of different options for not only direct fellowships that we link to, but also databases of fellowships that you can look into. So that's a quick overview. It's going to take a lot of work, but I definitely recommend putting in some time.
Fantastic. And I want to add in here, for all the attendees today, you've all also become eligible for the SEED Scholarship Fund. So if you are applying to the Elliott School at GW, you can apply for the Business Leadership Scholarship or the Women in Leadership Scholarship that we have available. Each of them are $5,000 each. All you have to do is make a small application through our website and then make sure that you get an admit at the Elliott School as well. So that's another opportunity that's open to students. Daniel, I'm conscious of time. We'll take the last two questions here. One, is there a CGPA limit or CGPA expectations for students coming to the Elliott School?
No, there is no minimum GPA requirement for any of our programs. Our average GPA of our incoming student body last year was about a 3.4. But like I said, not a minimum requirement by any means. We have plenty of students who have above that GPA as well as below that GPA. I would say that if you are particularly concerned about your GPA, and of course, I'm saying this on a 4.0 US scale. If you're concerned about your GPA, you're welcome to address that in your statement of purpose. But also we look at your actual transcript itself. We are going course by course to see what courses you took. We are looking at the caliber of the undergrad institution that you went to. So if you went to a really strong school and took very difficult courses and got a 3.1 GPA out of 4.0, that's going to look a little bit different than if you got a 3.1 GPA at something that's, maybe known as a bit of an easier school or something like that. So just be aware that we take all of your application into account, not just a GPA minimum.
Fantastic. Last question, and there's a few people that have asked around a similar subject, but Geeta has particularly asked this as well. There are students that are preparing for civil service or public service in general, and they've kept political science or international relations as a backup option to pursue programs in. For someone with that kind of background, are there programs at the Elliott School in particular that you'd recommend?
Sure. I would say there's no one particular program that's best for any particular career outcome, because our programs are so interdisciplinary and flexible and allow you to really specialize in your specific interests. You can really do that and go on to any outcome with any of our programs. This is another place where I recommend taking a look at that employment survey on our website, and just seeing if if the exact career that you want is listed multiple times for one of our particular programs. That might give you a hint that might be a better the best program for you to kind of specialize in. That being said, I think International Affairs is a great program. There's a reason why it's our most popular flagship program, because you can really specialize it completely how you want. It's our most flexible and customizable program. That's a program where you can have 2 concentrations. You can create your own concentration in consultation with your program director and your academic advisor. So a lot of people there to really kind of help you formulate exactly the career course that you want to take to be able to reach academic course you want to take to achieve your career goals and outcomes.
Fantastic. Thank you for that, Daniel. If I can request you, if you could put an email address in the chat box for any questions that all of you that have taken time to attend here today. If you have more questions, please feel free to write to the school. The email address is in the chat box here, which is esiagrad, so esiagrad @gwu.edu, gwu.edu. Apologies for that. Please make sure that you engage with the school. Daniel, with that, I want to take a moment to thank you for taking time today and being here with us through the session. For all the participants, I hope you found this session to be of value. We wish you the very best in your academic pursuits. If there's any way we can help, please feel free to follow us on Instagram, as well as email us for any questions that you may have. For today, that's all for now. Thank you for being here, and hope you have a wonderful evening. Thank you all.
Thank you all so much. Have a great day.